This is Technically Legal, a podcast about legal technology, innovation in the legal industry, and the impact tech is having on the law. I'm Chad Main, the founder of legal services company Percipient, and on today's show, I'm talking to Bridget McCormick, who heads up the American Arbitration Association, and Colin Rule of ODR.com. This episode includes two people with very distinguished careers. Bridget McCormick, who now heads up the American Arbitration Association, aka the AAA, and Colin Rule, who's the founder of ODR.com, which the AAA just acquired. Bridget has served in just about any role you can think of in legal. She started working for legal aid and for the public defender's office doing trials and appellate work. She then started teaching with stints at Yale and then Michigan, and yet she still wanted to make more impact in the legal world and ran for the Michigan Supreme Court, where she ultimately ascended the ranks and became Chief Justice of the court. Fast forward to 2023, and she took the helm of the AAA. At the AAA, one of Bridget's biggest initiatives is bringing tech into the arbitration process, and that's where our other guest, Colin Rule, comes in. He founded an online dispute resolution company, or ODR as they say, about 15 years ago that ultimately became ODR.com, which the AAA just announced it was acquiring. To say that Colin is an OG in the ODR world is an understatement. He literally wrote the book on it in the early 2000s when the internet was still brand new. About that time, too, eBay brought him on board where he ran the company's ODR function. When he left eBay, there were 60 million disputes a year, but it only had 25,000 employees. In today's show, Bridget and Colin will fill us in about AAA's acquisition of ODR.com and the strategic partnership between those two organizations to revolutionize dispute resolution. They'll also talk about AI's transformative role in dispute resolution and how the AAA is using artificial intelligence both internally and with external tools to improve efficiency and accessibility. All right, let's get to my conversation with Bridget McCormick and Colin Rule. We're going to start with a fun fact about Bridget. Her siblings have very successful careers in entertainment, but Bridget never caught the acting bug and decided to go to law school instead.
No, I never thought I would pursue entertainment. That wasn't on my list. So nope, my siblings have made a very good living that way, but it's not for me.
You decided to go to law school. Did you do any entertainment at all, like plays in school or anything like that before you went to college, or no?
I didn't. In law school, I did have the starring role in the law school musical when I was a 1L. But I will confess that I only tried out for it because John F. Kennedy Jr. was actually cast as the male lead. And so the female lead was going to get to have a romantic scene with John F. Kennedy Jr. So I had to go out for it, and I got it. And I think my dad was like prouder of that than even the fact that I went to law school.
So you go to law school, you go to NYU Law, and then pretty shortly thereafter, I think maybe you work in legal aid, you definitely become an appellate defender, right?
I did. I was a trial public defender at the Legal Aid Society in Manhattan, and then an appellate defender at the Office of the Appellate Defender, which is a little boutique appellate defense shop in Manhattan. So I did a lot of trials and appeals in New York courts for about 5 years.
After some teaching at Yale, you end up as a professor at Michigan.
That's exactly right. I did a 2-year teaching fellowship at Yale and then went on the market, landed at Michigan in a tenure track job, long-term contract track job, technically, and spent 12 and a half happy years on the faculty at Michigan.
And then after Michigan, as we know, you ascend to the Michigan Supreme Court. Now, here's one I've been dying to ask you is, why the Supreme Court? Why not a lower court? Why did you just went for the top? Like, what was in the calculus? What made you leave teaching to go to be a jurist in general?
Honestly, I was litigating a lot of appeals in the Michigan Supreme Court with my students in different clinical programs I was running. And so I was a regular advocate in that court. There was a retirement on that bench, and someone suggested to me that I should consider running for the open seat. I thought that was a silly idea. Who needs politics and elections? And I had a good job, a better paying job than the one I was going to run for. But then the idea kind of stuck with me, and more people started talking to me about it. And I sort of ran for office thinking with some old-fashioned ideas. I thought I could make a difference. State Supreme Courts have administrative oversight of all the courts of the state, so they have responsibility for how the justice system works for everyday people. And I had this crazy idea that I might be someone who could make a difference in that particular role. The decision-making part of the job is important, but the administrative oversight part of the job is, in my view, as important, if not more important, at least during emergencies like a pandemic, for example. So I ran for office because I thought I might make a difference. You don't get to do that on a trial court. So you only get to do that on the state Supreme Court.
And obviously you did. I mean, you had a very successful career. You ascended the ranks there. You're heading up AAA now, but what reason for the departure. Why did you decide to step down from the bench?
I was finishing my second term as chief, and on the Michigan Supreme Court, our norm is you do two-year terms. So I was going to be done with my term as the Chief Justice. And the Chief Justice is, in my view, the place where I really had an opportunity to make a difference in how regular people experience their justice system. And going back to being an associate justice wasn't going to scratch the itch that I wanted to keep scratching, which was how do we figure out how to make our justice system better for more people? So the timing was right for me to look for something else. And the AAA happened to be looking for a new CEO at that time. So it just kind of worked out.
Well, it's a good fit, obviously. It makes sense. And you bring some real experience that's a unique experience that very, very, very few in the world have, the AAA. So it's a good, cool move and a good fit. So Colin, let's move to you. By the way, Colin, you have a great name for what you're involved in. I know you probably hear that a lot, but it's great.
People have told me, and maybe I should take some advice from Bridget. If I was a judge, I could be Judge Rule, which I think that'd be pretty cool, right? But my email address is my first initial plus my last name. So it's cruel@mediate.com, which is kind of a bit of a,
that's good. I like it.
Cruel mediator. But
I like it. You get a degree in political science and I believe peace studies also. Was that a combined degree or are they separate degrees? And specifically, tell me about peace studies. Like, what is it and what drew you to it?
In high school, I was a competitive debater, and I traveled around the country and did a lot of debate. And I got pretty good at it, but I just got tired of the arguing and fighting all the time. I just didn't feel like it was more heat than light. So when I went to college, I really wanted to become a peacemaker. So I went to a very small Quaker college called Haverford outside of Philadelphia, which didn't have a debate program, and majored in political science because I was very interested in politics. But there was a concentration called peace studies.
So Haverford, it's funny. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm reading a book, believe it or not, on the former mayor of Las Vegas, Oscar Goodman. Did he go to Haverford?
Oscar was a Haverford alum. Yes, exactly. Took a different path than me, as kind of defended a lot of mob guys. But,
still,
I think he's the only mayor in the United States that actually had a liquor endorsement deal. And at every city council meeting, he had a gin and tonic with Tanqueray gin. So, he did it for a long time, and then his wife took over. So, Vegas, it's an interesting place. But yeah, Oscar and I share the connection to Haverford.
That's so funny. I'm finishing up that book. I was on like the last chapter last night. I remember Haverford. It came up. That's funny. So you go to college, peace studies, and then I guess not surprisingly, kind of connected. You go to the Peace Corps in Africa, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, not to give it too much, I got introduced to mediation. I was trained by the Friends, the Quakers. They came out and did a mediation training on campus, and I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I ran the campus mediation program and ended up getting a job at a place called the National Institute for Dispute Resolution in Washington, and worked there for 2 years, and then did the Peace Corps in Eritrea in the Horn of Africa, and then came back and got a degree in public policy, and again, focused on conflict resolution and negotiation, and actually ended up getting a graduate certificate in conflict resolution at night when I was at Harvard. So that was it. I was a diehard mediation guy from the earliest days, from sophomore year of college.
What I think's really cool is you got the certificate in 1999, according to my notes. Is that right?
That's right.
At some point around then, you're starting to write a book on dispute resolution. Is that the right time frame?
I was always a nerd. I ran a bulletin board out of my bedroom when I was 11 in North Texas. So I always loved technology, but dispute resolution and technology were two completely separate things. I mean, there wasn't anybody really using technology in the dispute resolution process. But then the internet came up during the 90s. And I got really interested in, wow, what is this going to mean? And e-commerce was growing. So people started to talk about, well, how are we going to resolve disputes that arise between people online? And I said, well, I'm the guy for this. I'm a nerd and I love dispute resolution. I should be the one to figure this out. So I wrote a book called Online Dispute Resolution for Business. And it was one of the first books in ODR. It got me a lot of attention because there were big companies like eBay and Amazon that were starting to grow online. They had to figure out how to resolve these disputes. So I started a company called Online Resolution in Cambridge, Mass. after I graduated, and we were one of the first ODR providers. And then one day I got a call from eBay, and they said, hey, we need you. So that was when I came out to Silicon Valley in 2003.
It's amazing that you're ahead of the curve. I mean, this is 1999. I mean, the internet really, it still doesn't it's taken a foothold, but in 99, it's still early days. What did it look like? What did online dispute resolution look like in 1999? And what specifically was your company doing?
Well, interestingly enough, even back in my bulletin board days in the late 80s, we did have disputes online, but there was no internet. We called them flame wars. So people would get into these online discussion forums and start going after each other. And I did have mentors in this space. The founders of Mediate.com, John Healy and Jim Melamed, they had actually worked on a website called ConflictNet, which again was a pre-internet discussion forum for mediators. So, it was clear that we needed to figure out, we're building a new kind of social environment online, and how are we going to resolve disputes? Because, wherever people are, there's conflict. That was really what the seeds of it were. But then e-commerce is what created the initial demand for online dispute resolution. So I was really focused on that at eBay and PayPal. But you're right, that was before Facebook, that was before the iPhone, that was before Zoom. We didn't have any of those technologies. So it was very text-based. It was very kind of menus, people sort of picking solutions out of, what kind of problem do you have? What kind of solution do you want? And what's great is all the technologies that have been invented between then and now, we utilize in ODR. So, obviously the pandemic moved everything online. So suddenly online dispute resolution is a much bigger priority because the vast majority of mediations in the United States are happening through technology. It's amazing to see how things have changed over the last 25 years.
What year did you leave eBay?
2011.
Do I have these numbers right? When you left in 2011, there were 60 million disputes. There were only 25,000 employees in the whole organization. Is that accurate?
That's exactly right. I think that's more than the U.S. civil court system. And, that was in 2011. So I'd be surprised if that number hasn't doubled since. And Amazon is probably doing 3 times more disputes than eBay, and Alibaba is probably doing 3 times more disputes than Amazon. So, if you add these all up, you're talking about more than 1 billion disputes per year. It's continuing to grow because e-commerce is growing about 13% per year.
The vast majority of the disputes, at least for eBay, they're resolved without human intervention. It's all between the parties and online, correct?
That's right. It's a software algorithm that creates an environment where the parties can negotiate a resolution themselves. So, we got about 50% of those cases resolved by mutual agreement between the parties, but 90% of those cases were resolved without an eBay employee having to touch the case. And it was just because we had such incredible volume. eBay was doing more volume, transactional volume on a daily basis than the NASDAQ. So we had about 12 to 16,000 disputes per day.
When we come back in just a couple of minutes, Bridget fills us in about all the tech initiatives that the AAA have embarked on, how they're using AI, and she and Colin will also fill us in about why the organization's acquisition of ODR.com is a win-win for everybody. I'm Chad Main, and you're listening to Technically Legal.
We need to do more with less. That is the key takeaway nowadays from almost every survey of in-house counsel. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if you actually could do more for less? By combining legal expertise and technology, Percipient enables legal teams to get more work done for less. Buried in contracts and sales is frustrated with turnaround time? We can help with that. Did you just get hit with a subpoena and reviewing 100,000 documents and files will tax your resources or cost you a small fortune in billable hours? We can help there too. Our team of legal professionals leverage tech and project management principles with the right amount of human oversight to deliver precise, efficient, and cost-effective legal solutions. Whether it's legal operations and contract management support, subpoena compliance, or document review, Percipient is your partner in really doing more for less. Percipient. Legal services powered by technology.
All right, we'll get back to my conversation with Bridget and Colin in just a second. But before we do, as I always do, I want to direct you to tlpodcast.com. At that website, there's a dedicated episode page for this episode, as with all the other episodes, links to more information about our guests, and ways you can get in touch with us. Speaking of which, if you want to get a hold of me directly, you can email me at cmain@percipient.co. That's C-M-A-I-N at percipient.co. You can catch me on LinkedIn and also on X. All right, let's get back to my conversation with Bridget McCormick and Colin Rule.
Bridget, when you come over to the AAA, obviously now one of your big initiatives is to bring in tech, AI, to bring in online dispute resolution. Was that a decision made before you got there, or are you bringing this idea and trying to get AAA into the modern times? Because I think it was founded in the 1920s?
I would say that the AAA had a sophisticated innovation program underway before I arrived, and it was robust. There was resources put to it, and I definitely doubled down on it. And generative AI really only, sprung into the general public's knowledge a couple of months before I started at AAA. So I definitely showed up with my foot on the gas on figuring out what it was going to mean for our business, both our ops, what does it mean for our internal operations, And what does it do to our core products and services? So from the very first month I started, I had the senior team get on a learning program about generative AI and what it was going to mean. And then we started rolling out all kinds of generative AI processes and tools and experiments as early as last spring.
Did I hear this correctly, or maybe I read this correctly, that you kind of got the AI bug because you were looking for hard cider in northern Michigan? Did I hear that right?
You did. I will confess to having set up a GPT account the first day it debuted. And that was my first ask because we were headed to Northern Michigan. And I wanted to see if I could get to all this hard cider places in one day. And so I asked it to, write me a plan for visiting all the hard cider places in one day. It actually got one wrong in a certain county. It gave me one that was in a neighboring county. When I told it that it was wrong about that, it was very apologetic. And so I just hit it off with ChatGPT right there that first day. We had a good start.
It had too many hard ciders when it answered you. Did it give you a map?
It didn't give me a map, but it did give me the most efficient route, and it was easy to figure it out on the map. It sort of told me how to get from one to the other without, showing me a map. I bet now you could ask it to draw you a map, and it would do it.
I want to talk about the AI models you're working on at AAA, but before we get there, tell us about the innovation team at AAA, because it's very sophisticated. I mean, it's way more sophisticated than many, many, many law firms out there and internal legal teams. So it's in court systems, obviously. So describe it, what the team looks like and what it does.
We're really lucky to have such a great team and a well-resourced team. We have an executive who leads the team, a member of the senior team who runs this paid team, and then a bunch of other volunteers. So she has 3 deputies, and they're working full-time on our innovation projects, pipeline, program, prioritization, and resourcing of those projects. And then everybody in the company is connected to each other on a platform that we use called Bright Idea. And it's an innovation platform that allows anybody who has an idea to upload it to the platform. Everybody else can comment on it, vote on it. And at a certain point, those ideas move from the platform to our innovation staff who vet them, and a senior team vets them, and they get sent to a Go team for a design sprint and some user testing and consumer information. And many of them then get acted on. We've had hundreds of ideas come through the pipeline that way. Some of them are actually fairly easy to put in place, but you just need someone to be able to have a place to communicate that idea. Every single person in the AAA also does 3 hours of innovation training. They understand that we want ideas coming from everybody, no matter what their job is, because everybody's going to have some ideas for how we improve our operations and how we improve our products and services. So we wanted to make sure everybody understands that that's part of the job. Executives are incented based on their innovation work and their innovation hours. It's really now in the company's DNA. It's kind of how we do business. So it's exciting. It's a great place to work. And that's one of the reasons it's a great place to work.
So getting back to AI, because that's obviously one of the things your innovation team's working on. You've already alluded to it. There's some internal tools you have, I think, available just internally at AAA and to the arbitrators. I think there were 3. One helps analyze contract clauses, if I remember correctly. One will put together scheduling orders. And then there's a third that escapes me. What's the third?
It's a chatbot for filers. So you have people who are filing cases with the AAA. It's a natural language chatbot also built on the GPT platform.
Is it used by attorneys, I assume, or is it parties that are unrepresented? The chatbot, or is it for everybody when they go to file an arbitration?
It's for everybody. Some attorneys have filed so many cases with the AAA, they probably will never use it and they don't need it. But other attorneys are filing one for the first time, and it's a much more efficient way to figure out answers to questions. But for self-filers, and we have lots of those, we think it'll be a wonderful tool. I should say that one's still in beta. We're still getting a lot of inputs on that one to tune it. But for self-filers in particular, we think it'll be especially useful.
And what kind of questions is it asking?
It answers questions. I mean, it asks questions if it doesn't understand what you're asking, but it's like many other chatbots, it's sort of a natural language interface for, this is what I'm trying to do, how do I do it? And it then communicates with you to help you do what it is you're trying to do.
Okay, so I had it in reverse. It's not saying, hey, it's not asking what type of arbitration you're filing, what's the amount of controversy. It's the user asks the chatbot if they have questions about the filing process.
Correct.
And then the other one, scheduling orders, if I recall correctly, the arbitrator enters in data about the case, like what type of case it is, like I guess other attributes who the parties are. And the AI model will generate a scheduling order that he or she can then tweak and then give to the parties as the, control the case and schedule the case.
Yeah, it's a little bit more efficient than that. In fact, there's a Zoom recording of the preliminary hearing where the parties discuss all of those things with the arbitrator. And then that Zoom
Ah,
recording is processed against the AI platform that we've built, which was trained on lots of other scheduling orders, of course. And it produces a draft scheduling order, which then the arbitrator can tweak or change or just sign off on and send it to the parties. And so something the arbitrator used to have to do by hand is now done by this tool, and the parties get to save money because the arbitrator is saving time.
that's great. I mean, that is really cool use of some technology right there. So lastly, the contract clause. Explain how the AI works analyzing contract clauses.
What we've actually built is it's called Clause Builder AI. And we had a legacy drop-down clause builder tool that helped people who were trying to build an ADR clause for a particular kind of contract. And some ADR clauses are going to include some things that others don't. Some are more nuanced than others. And what we did was, again, trained the tool on a library of perfected clauses which we know are going to be upheld in courts if they're challenged. And now the users get to, in a natural language interface, tell the chatbot what kind of clause they're trying to build and what their contract is about and what they want in it. And the chatbot will walk them through the different pieces of that clause that should be included and helps them build the clause for inclusion in the contract. And that was just released into the wild last week. So that's pretty new on the market.
You gave a keynote speech at Suffolk Law School for the legal tech program. And in that, you went over a lot of the innovations AAA are doing. But one thing piqued my interest, and I want to ask you what the plans are. You said in that speech there are years and years of unused data that AAA holds, and you want to use tech to get value out of that. What are you thinking there? What are the plans, if anything, cooking right now to that regard?
A lot cooking right now. Although I would say that most of what's cooking right now is making sure the data is ready for building whatever it is we think we might build that the market would want, our users would want, would make dispute resolution better for more people. And we do have considerable amounts of data. I mean, we administered over 500,000 cases just last year. So an awful lot of people have come to the AAA over its almost 100-year history to help them resolve their disputes. And some of that information is going to be helpful, probably at least in building, tools for people to get predictive analyses or even more automated decision making in certain disputes. You could imagine some disputes where people would be interested in a much faster, therefore more efficient process. So we are working on that. Colin was in a meeting with us just yesterday, and those meetings are happening all the time.
Colin, let's get back to you. So there was recently announced that AAA was acquiring ODR. So let's get there. Explain, what is ODR? It's a company you helped found or founded. What does it do? Give a little bit of history.
Sure, I'll take a step back, actually. Online dispute resolution is the portion of the dispute resolution field that figures out how to leverage information and communication technology to help people prevent, manage, and resolve their disputes. So, as I said, in the late 90s, that was really when ODR started to come up. And there's a global field. There's a center at UMass Amherst called the National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution. So the ODR field has been growing pretty rapidly. But yes, this company, ODR.com, is part of Mediate.com, Arbitrate.com, a family of companies that are focused on the synergies between technology and dispute resolution. So ODR came out, as I said, of e-commerce, but it's grown very rapidly. And I think the online dispute resolution field is now very common in the U.S. courts. It's common in courts around the world to use for many kinds of disputes, everything from low dollar value civil cases like family, landlord, tenant, small claims, debt cases. You mentioned e-commerce and online cases. It's not just purchasing tangible items. It's also, you need to have redress processes for services. So companies like Airbnb and Lyft and Uber and Upwork, they all have resolution centers where you can get your problem resolved. It's becoming a growing priority for international organizations too, because we have to have a way to resolve these cross-border, cross-jurisdictional cases. So ODR is growing like crazy, and ODR.com is a company that we created to build technology specifically for ODR systems in all different contexts, commercial contexts, international contexts, and judicial contexts. So that's what ODR.com is. It's a software platform for building online dispute resolution processes.
And you founded this after you left eBay, correct?
So I spun a company out of eBay in 2011, which was called Modria, which was an ODR company. And we sold that in 2017 to Tyler Technologies, which is the leading court technology company in the US. And I was with Tyler for 3 years building out their court ODR. And then I was hired as CEO of Mediate.com. And we started ODR.com soon after I joined Mediate.com in 2020.
And if I understand correctly, ODR.com, I don't know if bespoke's the right word, but users, organizations come to ODR.com and you kind of create a program, a dispute resolution program for that particular customer. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's a configurable platform. So we can resolve cases very simple, like as I said, buyer-seller transactional cases, all the way up to very complicated commercial arbitrations. So it has a lot of different modules in terms of document sharing and discussion forums and financial tracking and, panel management. Everything's integrated into ODR.com. So you can think about it as kind of like a resolution center in the cloud. Everything that you would need to manage a dispute resolution process from intake all the way through to resolution is all included in ODR.com.
And by way of example, I saw the universities using it. I think the IMF I saw used it. Courts, you already mentioned
That's
courts.
right. ICANN, NASA.
Yeah, NASA. That's the one I wanted to ask you about. How is NASA using this?
Well, one of the things we do a lot of work in is ombuds. So I don't know if you know what ombuds people are, but they're people inside organizations that can help find solutions and pathways for people that encounter difficulties within their organization. So we're working with the Organizational Ombuds Office at NASA. So that mainly means mostly workplace type issues are being processed through the platform. But that's the work that we've done with NASA over the years. But as I said, ICANN, the Red Cross, the IMF, it's often their ombuds offices that are using our technology to manage all of their ombuds visits and cases in the cloud in a secure way. Because as you might imagine, there's a lot of sensitivity around those types of workplace issues.
Right.
So our platform is highly, highly secure and confidential.
So in recent times, it's the last few weeks, AAA acquired ODR.com. How did the genesis of that happen? Was this discussions internally at AAA? ODR.com approaches AAA? Where did this all come from?
Well, it's a great question. I think your first answer is just listen to Bridget. I mean, she's so inspiring, her pathway and her vision for where AAA is going. I mean, everyone in the dispute resolution field is really jazzed about where AAA is headed. But the second part of the answer is I've worked with AAA for almost 20 years. We built a big, essentially ODR system, online case management system for one of the case volumes that AAA manages that does insurance cases. So I worked very closely with a lot of the folks at AAA and was just incredibly impressed at their professionalism and the quality of the work that they're doing. Really, AAA is the largest dispute resolution organization in the world, and it's kind of the gold standard for ethical, transparent, well-run dispute resolution processes. So I've been an admirer for a long time. But Bridget and I actually were on a panel together last summer at the American Legal Institute conference in Washington, D.C., and we had lunch afterwards, and we're just chatting, and I had approached some of my friends at AAA about the possibility of doing some work together. And as those conversations accelerated, we started to realize, wait a minute, there's some pretty exciting synergies between our two organizations. Actually, the discussions between Mediate.com and AAA had started, 10 years before, but we just never found a way to get it over the finish line. But, Bridget's team is just amazing, and she's got some great people that helped to figure out what the ZOPA, the Zone of Potential Agreement, could be, and we worked on it over the last 4 or 5 months, and we got it over the line. And my team is ecstatic. We're so delighted to be partnered with AAA, to be able to leverage the reach that AAA has. So it was just a natural. I think we also share a passion for ethical, transparent dispute resolution, and we want to advance the field over the next 50 years. So the synergy in our missions, I think, made it an easy decision in the end to work together.
And Bridget, is the goal with this acquisition of ODR.com to help facilitate in a more efficient manner existing arbitrations, the usual type of arbitrations that AAA handled? Or is it to enable access to dispute resolution to those that might not otherwise have had it because it can be more efficient? Or is it both? Like, what's kind of the game plan? What's the main goal? What's the driving force behind this?
Both and lots more. Yes, I think that there are ways in which the legacy business can move in a direction to provide more efficient services. But the truth is, not every dispute is created equal. And some disputes are always going to want an arbitration process with a human arbitrator, or sometimes even 3 human arbitrators, and all of the procedural fairness and steps that entails. Other disputes, people, institutions, businesses are going to want a much lighter touch, faster, less expensive process. And ODR and mediation are going to provide lots of new solutions, some for our existing customers and some for entirely new customers and entirely new markets. In the United States, most civil disputes go without any redress. You probably have some of those. There are probably lots of disputes in your own life where you've thought, this is probably unfair. They should probably, pay me for that. They didn't really fix my washing machine, but who has time to figure that out, right? There are lots of disputes that lots of people are not able to get help with. And with a new set of lighter touch services and products and the team at ODR and Colin as their leader, we're just excited about all of the ways in which we're going to be able to affect the future of dispute resolution. We really do think we can make it not only faster and easier and more user-friendly, but do it while giving people trust and confidence that it's a good resolution for everybody. So we're just excited about the synergies and the different things that we bring together, and we think 1 and 1 makes a whole lot more than 2 in this case.
To that point, why do you decide to bring it in-house versus just contracting with ODR to build these processes or use the tool for the AAA?
Yeah, I think the answer there is simple. I mean, I think our missions are so aligned. I've said Colin is kind of my mission spirit animal, that we are going to be able to do a whole lot more as genuine partners than, we have lots of contractual relationships with lots of other companies, including a lot of SaaS companies, frankly. But this team and their mission is so convergent with ours that we're just going to be able to do a whole lot more working together than we would in a contractual relationship. We just want to change the way humanity resolves the disputes. It's just a tiny little mission that we have. And we think we're more likely to get there if we're working on it together.
Bridget, Colin, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. If people want to get started with AAA, ODR.com, or learn more, where do you want to send them?
I would send folks to the AAA AI Lab page. We have an AI Lab, and you can find out everything we're doing. And the AAA AI podcast is another way to keep up with everything we're doing related to technology and AI. And let me turn to Colin, because I also want you to go to ODR.com.
We are actively looking for partnerships that we can work with dispute resolvers and general counsels and legal service organizations and courts who can utilize the toolbox that we put together to build cutting-edge online dispute resolution processes. So I encourage anybody out there, when I meet a mediator or arbitrator, I always say, okay, what's your expertise area? And they say, well, I'm a specialist in construction disputes, or I do IP disputes. Okay, great. Tell me about that. Let's see, how can we use these ODR tools to build a flow that would work in that vertical? So please, all of your listeners, if you want to go to ODR.com and tell us a little bit about, your envisioned usage of these tools, we would love to explore that with you.
Okay, that's a wrap for today's episode. As always, we really appreciate you listening. If you want to subscribe, you can find us on most major podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, etc. Also, if you like us enough, I hope you leave us a favorable review. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, this has been Technically Legal.